And hi, everyone. Welcome to Scaling Accessibility, a design manager's tale. I'm thrilled and a little nervous to be here and hope that you all take away some helpful information that you can apply to yourself in your organization. My name is Allie, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Accessibility Design Manager at GitHub, and I am a white female with short brown hair, currently wearing a brown sweater. Before I get started, I wanted to make a quick note that throughout my presentation, I use a lot of decorative images, but they will be thematically described through my talk. Today, I'm going to take you through 3 pillars of my career journey: building myself, my experience of transitioning from an individual contributor to a manager; building my team, my experience building a team from scratch; and building a home, our team's experience of building a home for accessibility design at GitHub. So let's start with building myself. I am a former #never manager, a self-proclaimed title I gave myself years ago because the idea of being a manager had zero appeal. Why? I didn't have a good history of examples to look to, and focusing on my own growth felt difficult enough. I had experienced years of horizontal movement exploring my interests. I started in design as it was always a passion of mine. I moved to front-end development to learn how to bring my designs to life. I transitioned to UX to learn how to make these experiences easy to use and understand. And after attending an unforgettable accessibility roundtable, I shifted my focus to accessibility, as I knew that's where I belonged. So, how did I get to where I am today? It was May 2021, and we were over a year into the pandemic, all starting to rethink our life decisions and bake sourdough bread. I was 6 months into the accessibility role I had spent over a year building a case for. And I was wearing all the hats, advocating for accessibility through every possible channel of the business: design, engineering, QA, product management, site operations, customer service, and legal. I was exhausted and feeling defeated by the realization that being a team of one was just not sustainable. I was not in a position to grow the way I had planned, and I was lonely and not learning from others. I needed a team. So one day I went to LinkedIn and I did a job search for accessibility design because that was the part of accessibility work I truly enjoyed. The first position I saw stopped me in my tracks: Senior Accessibility Designer on the Design System team at GitHub. This role was my 2 main passions, design systems and accessibility, coalesced into an actual job. And it was at GitHub, whose vision is to be a home for all developers. And the person in this role would be working with folks who also specialize in accessibility. This was the growth opportunity I'd been seeking, and it honestly felt too good to be true. I immediately sent it to my husband, who encouraged me to stop everything I was doing and go for it. So I did. Since I hadn't had to apply for a job in over a decade, I spent a sleepless week refreshing my resume, pulling together an entire portfolio site, and I ultimately applied. Fast forward a couple anxiety-ridden months, and I got the job. I'd arrived at my dream job. I was surrounded by incredible design and engineering talent, thrilled for the growth ahead. I connected with the people, asked all the questions, and jumped into making our design system accessible. And it didn't take long before I began noticing some problematic patterns and gaps. Our system was built across two frameworks, Rails and React. And there were many shared components across both, meaning both libraries had their own version of the same component, like buttons. The problem was that many of these shared components were implemented differently, resulting in inconsistent interactions and functionalities, a big accessibility flag. Because of these differences, I needed to review the same component twice, effectively doubling my auditing workload. This presented an opportunity for improvement, and I needed to figure out what it was. This auditing work had shifted me more towards an accessibility engineering role, which gave me very little time to shape my role and function as an accessibility designer in this team. I needed help. We didn't have a way to validate the accessibility of our components. None of us had a lived experience in having a disability, and as a designer, I knew the danger of making assumptions. I needed a plan. Lastly, since the systems designers and engineers had never worked with an accessibility expert, they didn't know how to work with me. They didn't know what a review was, let alone when to request it or even how to ask for it. It was no wonder the system was in the state it was. I needed to create a process to bring us clarity. It was clear I had a tangled mess to work through. And to me as a systems thinker, this gave me great challenge and satisfaction of loosening and untangling these knots. I decided to treat this like any other untangling process. I would examine the why behind the mess, the origin of the knots, and start to unravel each one by one. My auditing workflow was the first area of focus, as there was clear room for optimization. With each audit, I found myself spending hours of time hopping around to so many different places to do my full evaluation. But as I dug into Storybook, our testing environment, I realized that a more efficient approach was staring me in the face. Storybook add-ons. By implementing just a few, I could consolidate much of my auditing workflow into one place, making the process a whole lot more manageable. They would also help engineers by providing them immediate feedback whenever they made their code changes. I'd identified some low-hanging fruit that would have lasting impact and require limited engineering resources to build. So I made a proposal, I shared it upwards, and voila, it got approved. Within weeks, the add-ons were live. One knot down, 3 more to go. Even after the optimizations were implemented, leadership was getting concerned by my slow progress. This work was far more tedious than they had assumed. I was at capacity, repeatedly becoming a blocker, but had to make them understand that this wasn't the place we could take shortcuts. I also had to break it to them that we needed to validate this work with folks with lived experience. I raised these concerns and worked with my manager and PM to take a look at how long it could take for Primer, our design system, to actually become accessible. With nearly 100 components, we projected that with just me, it would take 3+ years. That's a long time. So we started to do some napkin math. And with just a couple more accessibility folks, we could vastly reduce the timeline and increase the scale of accessibility across the entire GitHub platform. Not long after, I learned that we are opening headcount for 2 accessibility engineers and bringing on an accessibility consulting company with folks with lived experience who would be able to validate our work. 2 more knots untangled and 1 more to go. This last knot was the toughest of them all. I had a bird's eye view of all of the ecosystem pieces and needed to put my systems thinking to use. To build and maintain an accessible design system, we needed to establish a process that would integrate accessibility checks throughout the entire component lifecycle. And we were going to need 3, 1 in design, 1 in engineering, and 1 after implementation. So I started with design. I reached out to a product designer named Chelsea, who'd been advocating for accessibility long before I joined. She helped me define the criteria and workflow for this first check, the accessibility design review. I created the review template, documented the workflow, and put it in action to validate our assumptions. After a few weeks of testing and tweaking, it started to work. So I followed the same format for the other 2 checks. I worked with systems engineers and our consultancy company to define the review criteria and workflow for the accessibility engineering and sign-off reviews. We put those in action, ironed out the kinks, and soon had a holistic accessibility review process to integrate accessibility into our entire design system. The untangling was done. And taking a moment to reflect, I had gone from being an IC, an individual contributor, to a strategic thinker, all by conceptualizing and growing an entire accessibility review ecosystem. And as it turns out, others noticed this as well. I was presented with an opportunity. With accessibility becoming one of the company's top priorities, they were prepared to invest in a team of people who did what I did to help our accessibility efforts scale. Did I want to become the manager of an accessibility design team? The question threw me into a series of emotions that I now recognize were strangely parallel with the stages of grief. My immediate reaction, no, hell no. I was a never manager for the reasons mentioned earlier. I started to tell myself, we didn't need a manager. I'd made it this far without a manager who understood my work, and I was doing just fine. I was in denial. Then I found myself angry because this felt like something I wasn't allowed to say no to. How would that be perceived? How would saying no reflect on me and my dedication to this work? Next, the self-doubt kicked in. I started to wonder, what if I'm not good at this? What if I don't enjoy this work? What if I accept and then find myself regretting it? As I found myself moving closer and closer to acceptance, I became depressed with the realization that I'd be making yet another horizontal move, shifting from a place I built years of experience to a place I had no experience. I spoke with my friends and family who helped me refocus because I had listened to these internal voices long enough. I was okay. And by realizing I was okay, my confidence started to grow. I was who I was. I'd worked damn hard to get there, and I was worthy of this role. It was time to embrace the opportunity and move forward. And once I was able to move forward, I was able to recognize that this opportunity wasn't just about me. I realized how powerful it could be for a team of accessibility designers to have a manager who understands their work. I realized that establishing this team would help accessibility design become even more recognized and standard in the industry. I realized the impact this team could have for an entire community of people who'd been overlooked for so long. I realized that I should feel grateful. GitHub had recognized the need for this team and believed in me enough to lead it. I realized that I could still continue to grow in this space, but just in a different way. And just like that, I turned from a never manager to a manager. Sorry. So I stepped through that door. I embraced the discomfort for the possibility ahead. I began to dream of building, growing, and supporting a team that would help shift the world of design a bit more left. And now it was time to build my team. At that time, the only thing I was sure of was my vision. Build a home for accessibility design. One that we could invite product designers into and offer a safe place to educate, consult, and grow together. So here I was with a plot of land and permits approved to assemble a team of 3 specialists to make this home come to life. In just a short time, I had my first specialist. Remember Chelsea? I was thrilled to have her on board and to be able to create a space for her to focus on accessibility design full-time. In no time, my calendar started to fill up with interviews, and those internal voices started to speak up again. What was I doing? How will I know I'm picking the right people for this job? Will they care that I'm new? I had no plan, no strategy, and frankly, no confidence. Luckily, I had just joined a career coaching program to help me navigate this new world of management. I shared my fears and anxieties, and she refocused me by bringing me back to my vision. To build a home for accessibility design, I would need a team of specialists. So, what were the specializations we were missing? Someone with deep systems experience to fill my shoes with the design systems work, and someone with deep educational experience to help us ramp up our training. Both would also need to have strong interpersonal skills to ensure that our home would be safe and welcoming. Once I had this clarity, I had direction. I felt much more equipped to move forward with the interviews. Through each of my conversations, I decided to lean into one of my biggest superpowers, vulnerability. I let my guard down. I was candid that I was a brand new manager and would be leaning into my team of specialists to help design and build our home. At some points, I even had my sick toddler crawling all over me. I had showed all my cards. Did I worry that this honesty could backfire on me? Sure. I assumed they would question my abilities, wondering if taking this job under such an inexperienced manager would be a risky move. The internal voices were back once more, but this time I didn't let them take over because I needed to trust my intuition. This was my opportunity to see their interpersonal skills in action. And my intuition was right. Modeling vulnerability led to some incredible conversations that showed them demonstrating empathy, dependability, patience, teamwork, and motivation. I now had two clear standouts with the specialized expertise and interpersonal skills we needed to make this home for accessibility design a reality. We put out the offers and quickly had a full team roster. Chelsea, our product design specialist, Alexis, our educational specialist, shout out to Alexis who's doing a talk later, Eric, our systems specialist, and Eric, our systems specialist. Now that the team was assembled, it was time to break ground on our home. The first step for us was to make a plan. What size? What style did we want? We'd all come from different houses. We knew what we liked and wanted to keep, as well as the things we didn't like at all. And there was another layer. We needed to be intentional about accommodating the different motivations and needs of our guests. Some would want to grab something from the front porch and jet. Some would want to drop by for a quick chat. Some would want to stay for a meal, and some would want to crash for the weekend or even longer. The next step was setting the foundation, which was the most impactful thing that I could influence as a leader to set my team up for success. I remembered what it was like to be an IC, individual contributor, on an island of one. And I wanted to make sure that my team never felt that way. So to build a strong foundation, I needed to do a few things. I needed to model the behaviors and values that I expected from my team. Things like being authentic, curious, and adaptable, leading with empathy, compassion, and vulnerability. I needed to coach them by creating an environment of collaboration and experimentation that would enable them to grow and learn from each other. And I needed to show that I cared about them as people, their happiness, their well-being, and their aspirations. This foundation created the blueprint for how we would show up as a team within the broader organization. The framing of a house is the fitting together of pieces to give the structure shape and support. As a service team working in a fully remote environment, we built our framing to create a reliable and consistent structure. This way, designers could get curious, ask questions, and join us on this accessibility journey, knowing that they have our full support. Once the framing is complete, it's time for the specialist to get to work on the critical features of the interior. Things like plumbing, electrical, insulation, drywall, and flooring. Each specialist on my team focused on designing, building, and installing the critical rituals, tools, processes, and systems to make this house a home. Eric, our systems specialist, took my existing work and made it far better. He teamed up with our systems designers and engineers to develop a more efficient and collaborative process for designing and developing accessible components by default. Alexis, our educational specialist, developed an async education resource for designers, as well as a week-long workshop for those who wanted more hands-on education tied to their work stream. And Chelsea, our product design specialist with a passion for automation, built workflows and templates for our team's rituals to improve our efficiency, effectively making our home a smart home. Once the projects were done, we were ready for our housewarming. For folks who were walking by but didn't have time to stay, we would give them our accessibility design toolkit, a collection of async tools and videos to help them incorporate accessibility best practices into their daily workflows. For folks who wanted a quick question answered at any time, we would chat on the front porch through our Slack channel, a public channel for folks around the organization to ask questions and engage in thoughtful conversation. For guests who had 20 minutes to spare, we would invite them into the living room for our accessibility design office hours. Weekly sessions we host for designers to get feedback on features and experiences as they're being designed. For guests who brought food and drink, we could share a meal in the kitchen in the form of an in-depth accessibility design review, a comprehensive evaluation of a component, feature, or experience. For guests enthusiastic and ready to learn, we could let them stay the week for our accessibility design bootcamp, a highly interactive workshop that would provide a framework for designers to think and design inclusively. And for those who just loved us so much, they wanted to move in, at least just for a little bit, we could offer our Accessibility Design Champions program, a semester-long commitment for designers to upskill and advocate for accessibility within their own teams, helping us scale accessibility across the organization. So now, the only thing left to do was get settled. Now that we're living in our home, there are some days we need to move the furniture around because we keep stubbing our toe, turning a corner. Light bulbs burn out and a pipe occasionally leaks. In due time, I'm sure we'll recognize where we might need to remodel or do an upgrade. But little by little, we're making it our own. And thanks to my team's work, product designers, product engineers, and project managers are helping us with these fixes. This home is not perfect because nothing ever is, but it's proudly ours. I'm incredibly proud of the team I'm leading today. The work we're doing and the cultural impact we're making is getting noticed. I've not only been able to help them grow as ICs, but in return, they've helped me grow as a manager and a public speaker, two things I said I would never, ever do. And it's not by accident. Reaching this point has required intention, commitment, and perseverance. It's taken me nearly a year to learn that there's no benefit in restricting myself based on fears, anxiety, or lack of experience. Through this journey, I've learned that opening my mind and embracing discomfort is not easy, and it may not always be pretty, but there will always be growth. I hope that coming along on my journey of becoming a manager and building a home for accessibility design can inspire you to do the same. Thank you so much for listening.
Wow, thank you, Allie, so much. In fact, if you look out the window of your home, you're going to see a moving truck pulling up because I'm ready to move in. That is so fantastic. I love the metaphor of the home in the business. I mean, I just kept thinking in my head, it takes a village, and it really does. And it takes a household more than a village. I mean, you've got to connect with each other, and you express that so well in your talk. And it's evident because as I'm watching the chat, I'm seeing your team chime in and say hello. I mean, Eric is there, Chelsea's there.
Hi,
They're all
guys.
behind you 100%. Just what a fabulous story. And I'm going through the questions, and they are amazing too. Thank you all so much for participating in the talk. I mean, really, putting stuff in chat and asking questions. This is just fantastic. So one of the top questions I have is, what has helped you in convincing leadership that accessibility changes require a dedicated team and not just a single accessibility specialist? I mean, you mentioned before in the beginning that you were wearing so many hats in in the beginning of your accessibility journey. And over again at this conference, I hear people saying they're getting burned out because they're wearing so many hats. And it's so difficult. And you've kept that talk going on, and it seems to be reoccurring. So I'm sure there's people listening that want to know how you did it. Was there something that you used in particular to convince leadership to do this?
At my former job, I spent over a year doing this. And it was very hard. I'm not going to go into every single thing that I did, but I invested countless hours and time and experiments and honestly put myself on the line to advocate for this as a true thing that's needed within an organization. Luckily, I mean, I was convincing enough and was able to at least get my role there, but was unable to get further investment for others. Coming into GitHub, the job was done for me. I didn't have to fight the fight. I didn't have to give the spiel. I didn't have to make that case for the need for this, because from the top down, and we all know this, accessibility will only be successful if you have leadership support, and it was there. So I've been so fortunate enough to be at this company in this time and moment where they've been willing to invest in us. And I'm not sure I have advice for folks, but what I'm hoping is that we can lead by example, my team, and really show what's possible when you do invest in accessibility design, and invest in accessibility as a program, invest in it as a full thing that your company really needs to apply by and like believe in and live, because otherwise it's not going to work.
Great. Thank you so much. Other people are just really wanting to know about those checkpoints in your accessibility design review process. Can you tell us any more about the checkpoints, or maybe even just a story about how you develop them.
So there's two streams of work. We have our design system checkpoints for how we have our separate, our different accessibility review processes through that life cycle. But then we also have checkpoints that we've established, created for the greater product design org. Is there one in specific that you feel I should go into?
Now, just any of them would be, the design would be good.
Okay. I will touch on the feature one
Sure,
for product
okay.
designers. That
Perfect.
also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just encouraging you. I love
Awesome.
hearing you talk about this stuff because it's so amazing. And I think so many of us here, share what you're going through, what you've been through in your journey. So,
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate everyone in the audience appreciating that. So for these product review features, that's, being completely honest, it's taken us nearly a year to find our flow. We've iterated countless times on our process, our approach, our delivery, the facilitation. There's so many different pieces of this that we've tested and gathered feedback on and reworked to make it work for product designers, because we need to meet them where they're at. So we've done everything possible to do that. When a product designer is in need of an accessibility design review, they submit an issue request that we've spent a lot of time really working on that form to make sure that they include all of the information we need to provide the best possible feedback, and that they're using design descriptions, because we have folks who attend our calls who have disabilities and can't see. And so it's necessary, and something we've integrated into this process is that we have them use design descriptions. So it allows them to talk through their designs and experiences and interactions, which helps everyone. Sometimes it helps them untangle themselves and find gaps that they didn't even realize they had because they're talking through it. So we have them submit a form, they get added to our agenda, and now it's evolved to we offer 2 weekly office hours, 2 office hours a week. Each one has 20 minutes per slot, and everybody comes. We have people who come to just observe because they like to learn and enjoy hearing about it. But mostly, we've had a full house for quite some time now. And we've seen, like, that's been the best way that we've been able to connect with the product design org, build trust, build rapport, and have them coming back time and time again. I'm 100% leaving out a lot more stuff that's included, or how we even got to this point today, but that's that process.
yeah, I love that you tied in the office hours into like just coming and sitting in the living room and having a discussion. Because it's so true. It's the living room or the kitchen, wherever the family sits down to have a talk.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what your office hours sounds like, which sounds very welcoming and enjoying. And I'm sure that you're also have some heated debates, just like any other family would.
We
That's
sure
what happens
do.
in accessibility, right? That's what makes them so much fun. Um, ah, so I have another question. Any advice for implementing an accessibility process or team in a company that has several subsidiaries and projects that operate like within themselves, meaning each having their own developers, designers, content team, etc.?
That's a great question. I think it comes down to figuring out how to do the least amount of work so you're not doing redundant work. You're not repeating yourselves or creating inconsistencies across the board. So if you're able to, if each subsidiary or team from each subsidiary is able to come together and align on some basic forms of thinking, on some principles, on some just the basic things, and use those principles to work towards their design systems. Similar to how I did my audits before, I needed to find the common ground so that I was not doing duplicative work. And I think that when you're working across, no matter how many teams, if you all can align on that single source of truth, but style it however you want, put your own spin on it or flair, then that, I feel, could be a helpful way to help you scale and make big change across the board.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's important for all these subgroups to work together. I've heard of other companies where they get into it about budget and, well, my team is on this budget, so they can't talk to your team because we can't cross the budget. So I think you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, these teams should be working together to solve these accessibility issues. Correct?
Yes, I would
Yeah.
say ignore the silos and push past it and find those opportunities to work together, because that is the only way you will make progress and be able to scale.
Yeah, fantastic. So how about yourself? How did you learn about accessibility yourself while advocating for it within your company? Kayla asked the question. She says, I'm very passionate about this and eager to help my team. It feels so overwhelming trying to learn all of it before I can become a SME at work and push it forward to my UX team and other work streams. I'm the only person in my small team that is interested in making this a priority. This just comes up over and over again. Any advice?
I mean, that's literally my story. The way that I pushed through, I just did it. I carved time for myself through work and would spend time just reading up on it, learning about it. I used DQ resources and took the WAS WAS course. That I spent as much time as possible during work to incorporate those learnings as there. We had hackathons, and for multiple hackathons, I worked on an accessibility project. I found opportunities to just kind of weave it into my day or weave it into my work in some way or form. And organically over time, I just became the accessibility person. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of pushing and pushing and pushing, and you may need to become that nag, but it gets you further along the way, and you're making everyone a better designer. That's what it comes down to. So I think just continue to push at it, lean into existing resources. And a big thing I didn't mention, I cold messaged people, cold called on LinkedIn. I knew very few accessibility people. I knew some at Amazon, but I started looking up accessibility on LinkedIn and connecting with folks. And I just started asking them, like, what do you do at work? What does your day-to-day look like? How have you had success? Where have you failed? Like, I was just trying to absorb all of those learnings myself so I could optimize as much as possible within my own work.
Oh, great. Yeah, you've kind of answered the next question too, but I'm going to ask it and see if you have any additional resources. But it starts out such a great talk. Thanks. Do you have any specific recommendations, resources, links to refer to when setting up an accessibility toolkit for a design system or accessibility team? You mentioned like DQ University and even LinkedIn as a resource. Are there any more that you use that you'd like to recommend?
I mean, there's a million out there. And I
Anything
think that
specific to developing the toolkit?
the toolkit itself, I think we've leveraged existing things like the Stark Library. Eric on my team has his own accessibility project site with a ton of resources. DQ, I have a blank, but I'm happy to also follow up and kind of dig in deeper. But there's a ton of existing stuff out there, especially when it comes to checklists.
Awesome. Okay, Eric, you're on the
Sorry, buddy.
you're on the hot seat. Go ahead and post your site in the chat if you're willing, and let other people come see what you've got going on. So that sounds great. You know, we can always cross communicate here. This has just been so fabulous, Allie. Thank you so much. It's just so good to know that us out here doing accessibility, wearing all these different hats, that we're not alone, and that, you know, there's possibilities, and we can build our home ourselves. I know you've hit on it several times, but I'm going to ask one more time to just give a summary of just one thing in your talk that you would recommend for a newbie. Just one bullet point.
A person just starting in accessibility?
Yes. Yeah.
I think just getting familiar with the basics, accessibility best practices. I believe, like, I know LinkedIn Learning has courses, Derek Featherstone's courses. I believe there's Udacity or Coursera courses as well. I think that that's probably the best, most well-rounded place to start. You'll get the full picture versus just kind of taking things in different articles or snippets. And then from there, maybe like that will pique your interest and you'll start to dig into other areas. But I think it's really helpful. And this is what we're doing with our boot camp that we're launching next week. We're giving basically like the 101 of what accessibility is, what it entails, what assistive technology is, who are the people and processes we should, like, who are the people that are who are affected, and then what are the processes we need to follow to ensure that we're designing inclusively.
Great. Well, really appreciate you, Allie. Thank you so much for your time. A shout out to the ASL interpreters that have been on here.
Thank you.
People really appreciate you. They mentioned it in chat. So thank you so much for being here. And I hope you have a great rest of AxeCon. There's more talks and fabulous stuff to learn. So keep learning right here at AxeCon, and we'll see you at the next session. Thanks, Allie.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.